Let's get the backstory out of the way quickly. My name is Calvin, Cal Sanders. I'm 33 years old, and I work for one of my best friends in the world. Her name is Toni Lapiro, and she's the same age as me. We went to college together. She was a business and design major, and I was a design and accounting major. We always had the same dream. We would graduate college together and then work on starting our own boutique that specialized in graphic design for small businesses. It took a few years of hard work at other companies to establish our reputation, but 5 years ago we did it. Although I don't own the company, I am emotionally heavily involved in making Zapiro, that sounds better than Lapiro, work. Toni is the owner and lead salesperson. She makes the contacts and introductions, and I handle the design. It could just be a sign for a business or part of an advertising campaign. We make it work. The small business community is vast and really needs our help. When I was working for a large concern as one of the drones doing crap work, I started dating Constance Connie Reynolds. She was, and still is, a very pretty woman about 3 years younger than Toni and me. Connie was a model at the agency I worked for, and we bounced ideas around during photo shoots until we finally started dating and then getting married. I consider myself very lucky to have hooked up with Connie, and she says the same thing about me, especially when we end up at a party. I consider her to be way above me in class, but hell, I just smirk and ignore it. Connie modeled in college. Surprisingly, her major was graphic design. Since she was a couple years older than me and went to a different school, we didn't meet until after college. Gee whiz, right? She was also very active in a sorority and admitted while we were dating that she had participated in numerous hangouts with their fraternity over the years. But I'm past that, and I'll blow your head off if you even think about suggesting I do something like that again. That was her first and last word on the subject. I didn't object to it. Connie was, to say the least, relaxed. Needless to say, Connie had agreed to become my wife about a year before Toni and I broke free. Connie supported us all along the way. Toni, on the other hand, is another matter. She is about 5 feet 8 inches tall and a little overweight. She works out constantly to keep herself in shape and looks like $1 million every day. Her smile goes great with her tan and blue eyes. I know there have been many contracts negotiated, but this was the one look where it seemed like we were equal to the other contender in everything. Male or female, it didn't matter. She knew how to mesmerize with a look. By day, she was the consummate professional. Decisive and direct, but tactful when necessary, she ruled our little kingdom. Because we had known each other for many years, there was a camaraderie between us that didn't involve the other 8 employees of our little business. I don't mean to say that she wasn't friends with the other employees. It's just that we had common experiences from school and then starting the business that set us apart. Did I ever reach that point? Honestly, back in high school I tried. That's how we met. We were both stag parties at a big party with lots of booze and music, and I asked her to dance. We swirled around the room and then introduced ourselves to each other. We went out for coffee that night to take our minds off the noise and were soon chatting like old friends. But that was where it ended. There just wasn't that spark that could take us further. Toni dated a lot. She had a lot of acquaintances she wanted to get to know better. She would date a man for a few months, sometimes even a year, but then all relationships would end for one reason or another. Since we were such a small group, Connie and Toni knew each other and had bachelorette parties together from time to time. I'm sure Connie told Toni what she wished I would change about myself, and Toni probably discussed her men at length. After all, isn't that what all women do? Connie was now 30 years old, and the challenges for her as a model were not as numerous as they had been when she was 18 or even 20. Connie was 5 feet 10 inches tall and had a willowy build. This type of build suits young models, but is not well suited for mature model shoots. In our area, more mom types were sought after. We started discussing offspring as Zapiro was doing well. As a matter of fact, Toni didn't need to make many cold calls anymore. Our success had led to new clients calling us. Okay, we've dealt with the backstory, now let's get to the heart of my story. It all started with Tony occasionally sending me out to meet with clients without her. Most often, it was a local business that we already had a working relationship with. I would sit down with the owner and discuss what he or she wanted to accomplish. Then I would use my notebook to take notes and do a little drawing as ideas came up. If we were in sync, the ideas came to fruition quickly and we were off to a specific goal. Sometimes the customer was so vague in sharing their goals that the meeting turned into a frustrating attempt to figure things out and work out something concrete. Then we usually had to schedule additional meetings to find a solution or solutions that would work. Snap! Tony first made a difference when we started working as a team by saying, "Look, we already have this client. I don't need to sell anything. You're the design guru, and this is what they need at this point. You can handle it." I was a little hesitant at first, since I wasn't a salesperson. When I try to sell, my tongue starts to boggle. Please give me a sketch pad, and the ideas flow on their own. Then these local meetings evolved into out-of-town meetings. Our little town was not an airline center, so we, meaning me, had to sometimes drive up to 150 miles or so to meet with a client. That's not such a long distance if the meeting was productive, but often I had to stay overnight when the meeting turned into a drawn-out effort to find something that fit the client's needs. When I was in the office, Tony always made a habit of stopping by for a chat or calling me into her office. She loved to tell me her stories of dating, all the trials and tribulations. This new love interest was no different from the others. The first time I heard from her new person began with, "I have a date tonight. I need to leave early to get ready." Well, that's new. You never leave the office early. Who is this guy and what did he do to my boss? Her smile was beaming. Well, first of all, it's not a guy. I've never been attracted to women, but this one has me hooked, and I need to see if there's any fire in her. That information caught my attention. Tony had never shown any inclination toward her gender. Who is this person? When can I meet her? Tony shook her head. Not yet, no. I can't let anyone find out who she is since she's married. Like me, she hasn't had any real experience with a woman, but she's looking forward to developing our relationship. It's just a night on the town for us. She picked up her purse and briefcase. You take charge, and I'll go do some beauty makeovers. I just nodded and went back to my desk. I had planned to work a little later that night, since Connie had told me a few days before that some of her model friends wanted to get together and cry about how fickle the industry was. I just grinned and asked her to be sure to take a cab or call me to give them a ride if they got too sad and started to lose their temper. I became engrossed in the campaign we were developing, and ideas started flying from my fingers to my notepad. I worked in pencil, shading and emphasizing my story map. Time flew by at the same speed my fingers were frantically trying to keep up with my brain. Sometimes ideas have to be forced out, and sometimes, like that night, everything clicks and you're off on your journey. That's why I keep a small notebook next to my bed. Sometimes I have a dream that answers all my questions, and I have to write it down or sketch it out before I can rest. Connie is also used to me getting up at 30 o'clock at night to go to my little home office and start drawing. I would like to say that I enjoy painting Connie. I have several versions of her face at home and in my office. Some are painted in oil, some in charcoal, but they all try to convey the love I have for her. Anyway, it was very late in the day when I was done with the raw product. I felt like in the morning I would be able to capture the essence of what I needed for this client. I looked up. It was 2 in the morning. Damn it. I checked my cell phone. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, a missed message came in from Connie asking where I was. I didn't answer anything, just turned everything off and made the 20-minute drive to our apartment. At home, I slid into bed, kissed the back of her neck to let her know I was home, and then I was dead to the world until the alarm clock let me know it was time to get up and go to work. I dragged my ass to work. Today it really was work and not fun as usual since I was so tired. I tried to focus on the night's work, but it wasn't coming. Plus, Tony wanted to tell me about her date. Cal, it was great. We connect on so many levels. I feel like I've known her forever. There hasn't been a topic we couldn't talk about, even if we disagreed. And she's so beautiful. We met at a local bar, the one that is usually frequented only by women. Many of the girls and women there wear wedding rings. It was my first time there, so I was surprised. I couldn't help myself. Fatigue was preventing me from filtering the information properly, and my male hormones kicked in. Did they do it publicly there? What about your companion? Was she uncomfortable there? She slapped my arm lightly. No, silly. There was nothing like that there. In fact, the whole place is pretty low-key. There's a small dance floor, but the music isn't too intrusive. Heck, we could talk more freely and without interference there than in any other bar or nightclub I can name. She paused and smiled. After all, it was a meat house. My date was often asked to dance, but she only danced with me. She paused, pondering my questions. I don't think she felt uncomfortable. The atmosphere is non-threatening, and we had a good conversation getting to know each other. Hopefully, we'll take it to the next level. She paused in thought. She was wearing a beautiful dress. I fully intend to have fun with her for hours on end when we finally get to that point. She stopped and looked at me. Shit, I have to go. God, I'd never seen Tony like this. Even when she was discussing any of her previous male friends, she'd never acted like this. She blushed, hurrying out of my office. I guess she needed to go and unwind. Within a few days, there was no more talk of her new lover. Tony and I had a meeting scheduled with the operator of a dairy farm that was about 4 hours away by land. This was a new client. The wife wanted us to come in and design a logo for their small corporate farm, but her husband didn't want to spend the money. We knew it wouldn't be easy, and we would never land a big contract, but it was a possible client, and we decided to go. On these trips, Tony usually tried to find a few more potential clients so that we could maximize our profits from these trips. This trip was to be no different. We would leave early Wednesday morning and drive to Reynoldville, where we would stay overnight at a local motel and meet the client on Thursday morning. If things went well, we would drive back in the afternoon and get home fairly late and take Friday off. If things weren't going well, and we needed to stay, however, we would come back on Friday. At least that was the route we had agreed on. Tuesday afternoon, Tony came into my office with a disappointed look on her face. Cal, something has come up. Can you handle a new client on your own? This was strange. What happened? I'm going to have to take a long drive by myself. That's almost 300 miles with nothing. I know, but my new girlfriend. God, she needs a name. Since she's married, I won't use her real name. Let's call her Madame X. Anyway, Madame X called. Her husband is going to be out of town for some conference, and she asked if I could come and keep her company. I agreed, but I wouldn't want to burden you like that. So instead of driving, the company will pay for a commuter plane ticket that will take you within 50 miles of the city, and I'll even rent a car for you. You won't have to leave until Thursday morning. You'll be there by noon and can meet with the client. If all goes well, you can fly back Thursday night and not have to stay overnight. If not, you'll be able to fly back on Friday and only spend one night there instead of a possible 2. I think that could work. But don't make it a habit. You know I'm not selling anything. I'm just trying to give the client what you promise. At that, she laughed, and I headed home. Connie was glad I wouldn't be gone until Thursday night. If you're lucky enough to sell that farmer your projects and get home Thursday night, you might get lucky too. I went to bed with a smile on my face. Wednesday was a good work day. When I got home, Connie was cooking in one apron. Fortunately, dinner wasn't ruined, and we enjoyed sitting on the table before eating. Thursday brought disappointment. The commuter plane hit every air hole between the two cities. My stomach ached from the effort of not erupting all over the cabin. Then I got something I rarely suffer from, a headache. It wasn't quite a migraine, but it was interfering with my ability to create. The trip to the dairy wasn't bad, but it didn't make up for the flight. Things got even worse at the dairy farm. The farmer, Jim Bell, wanted nothing to do with me. He called me a city slicker who knew nothing about the dairy industry. I think I calmed him down a little when I agreed, but he still didn't want to talk to me. His wife, Nancy, apologized, and the two of us sat down and tried to offer some ideas. She envisioned all of their employees wearing t-shirts with a unifying logo that would also look good on their trucks, tractors, loaders, and even their feed trucks and self-propelled manure spreader. My headache finally subsided enough that I was able to do a little drawing while we talked. No, I was not attracted to the farmer's wife. What do you call that, eroticism? Anyway, she made us a nice dinner, and I left my sketchbook on the table when we all sat down to eat. Jim was still a little upset by my presence, but he was a good host and didn't argue during the meal. And then, something happened. He glanced at my notepad and then shifted his gaze to me twice. He looked even more closely and then started smiling. I didn't know what tickled him, but I didn't want to break the spell and ask. Finally, he reached out and took my sketchbook. Where did you get that sketch from? He pointed to the cow's head I'd drawn. It was a bit cartoonish, but still very recognizable as a dairy cow. I shrugged. I don't know. Nancy and I were discussing ideas, and I just started drawing her. Why do you ask? She looks a lot like a cow I had when I was a kid. That old cow was the impetus for us starting the dairy. She's been gone for years, but I still miss her. She was almost a pet, gave the sweetest milk, and birthed the best calves. Nancy nodded. Flossie was a wonderful old cow, and she really started our herd. Some of her descendants still give us milk like she did. This started a real discussion. I suggested that Flossie should take center stage in any logo. We discussed ideas of depicting her chewing a cow, or maybe just with a stalk of wheat. We were close to closing the deal when we noticed the sun was starting to dip to the west. Jim suggested I go to my motel room and come back in the morning to finalize the concept. I was enthusiastic. Ideas were bubbling, but realized we needed a break. He also said he needed to go to the milking parlor and check on the evening milking. With those words, I headed into town and checked into a motel. The next day, after a hearty breakfast, I went to the dairy with my ideas. There, Jim and Nancy were approving of some of my ideas. We'll start small. Buy t-shirts with the final design. Then vinyl shields for the company cars. Jim also thought the logo would help thwart car thieves. Keys were always kept in the cars, and everyone could use them as needed. But there was always the concern that a car thief would have no trouble lifting the car. Having a logo on the equipment could help deter potential thieves. We were done by noon, and I booked a daytime commuter plane ticket as I drove back to the airport. I turned in my rental and was soon in the terminal. You only had to walk a few feet in this small airport. TSA screening was soon past, and I was flying home. This time the air was clear and there was little turbulence. Fortunately, my stomach wasn't hurting by the time I got home. On Monday, I went into Tony's office as soon as she arrived and told her how the trip went. She was pleased that we hadn't wasted any money on the trip, but it would be a while before we had a positive result, so I agreed. We might have had a satisfied customer, but depending on how far they went with the idea, there was little benefit to having customers so far from our home base. There was nothing we could do about it, though. After we discussed this and the plan for the coming week, I asked Tony how her date with Madame X had gone. She almost purred. It was better than I thought it would be. We ordered food since she didn't know when her husband would call in the evening. It seems that on trips like this, he's on and off the phone. You'd think he wasn't picking up a slag somewhere so he could roll off to the hayloft sooner, wouldn't you? Yeah, that might be true. I know I always call Connie when I leave and we have a nice chat before I can fall asleep. That's so good. I'm glad to hear that. Anyway, he didn't call, and we stayed sitting on the couch listening to light music. Then we stood around for a while and danced. I was delighted. In all the years we had known each other, she had never revealed details of her relationship, and here she was telling me about her first encounter with a woman. She continued. We danced some more and then we kissed. I told her that I had never felt attracted to a woman before, but over the years of knowing her, I had fantasized more and more about her loving attitude, her behavior, her class. I left in the middle of the afternoon. I wanted to stay the whole weekend, but her husband had to be home Saturday morning, so we couldn't spend another night together. I hope we get to do that night again soon. She looked very excited, and I walked out of her office to give her some time to pull herself together. I was happy for her, but a little sad for the hapless husband. His wife was having an affair behind his back. I didn't see anything good in that story. Anyway, back to work. I had to come up with projects. I sent out ideas for dairy products to the rest of the team, and soon we had logos ready for editing. Thanks to the internet, I could email the mock-ups and the bells could choose the one they wanted. Jim was so impressed that he asked me to embroider on a plaid cotton shirt with the design on the right breast above the pocket and send it to him. We had a young intern, and I sent her off with the specifications for the shirt. I advised her to check out a nearby farm supply store that also sells clothing. Of course, having been born and raised in the city, she had no idea that cotton plaid shirts existed, except in old Western movies. Tony and I met with a couple of potential clients that week, and it went well. I had a few sketches to show them before we even finished talking, and we got approval for the layout. Friday night, Tony and Connie got together and planned a double date. Tony, instead of suggesting that Madame X join us, agreed to go on a date with a guy named Ted. We went out to dinner and then dancing. It was a fun night. I had to bite my tongue many times to keep from asking Tony in front of Ted and Connie about Madame X. A couple times Ted and I skipped the dance and Tony pulled Connie to the floor. It's not unusual in our small town to see women dancing together, so it didn't raise any questions. The girls seemed to have a good conversation on the parquet, and after the number was over, they went to the restroom. Since women always need company in the restroom, I hoped Tony would talk about Madame X and Connie would pass the gossip on to me. I was still curious about the husband in all these respects. If this Madame X had left her husband, I couldn't see a positive outcome when everything went to shit. As the women joined us single men at the table, I noticed Connie looking a little flushed. Tony noticed the same thing. I threw my wife a perplexed look, but she only muttered, "Later." I held back my comments. Then Ted and I took the ladies out on the dance floor again for another number. I'm sure the women didn't want to hear us talk about the latest sports hero. As we said goodnight to each other and went home, I had to ask, did she talk about her new love, Madame X? Connie nodded. I think she had enough liquid lubricant to loosen her tongue a little. She did want to spend the evening with Madame X, but I guess Madame X couldn't find a way to leave her husband. Ted has no idea about anything and thinks he's going to get into bed with Tony tonight, but he was just a front. I caught the remark about leaving her husband. So I guess Madame X's husband isn't aware of what's going on then. He might let it pass his ears when he finds out, or he might go into a rage. I don't know exactly. He seems like a mild man, at least according to Tony, so I don't think he'd do anything physical to either of them. So Tony knows the husband? Why is she playing with fire like that? Oh, baby, she thinks she's in love. So maybe Ted will get lucky, some sort of booty call? I thought Connie was going to go apoplectic. We were driving in a dark car, so I couldn't see the color of her face, but her lips turned into a grim line, and she shook her head negatively. Finally, she replied, "No, I don't think so." Connie hesitated and looked at my profile. I saw it with my peripheral vision. At least that's what she told me. She's in love with this Madame X and won't cheat on her, no matter what the provocation. Connie had to do her weekly shopping on Saturday, so she was gone for a few hours. It was probably a little longer than usual, but I didn't pay any attention to it as the ideas started to take shape for the client. I was fully involved with the storyboard, as this time it was an ad campaign and we needed it to be perfect, as we don't do projects like this very often. Suddenly it hit me. Connie had said that Tony knew the husband. I remember Tony also hinted that she had known Madame X for a long time and that her feelings had grown stronger during that time. Of course, she probably knew the husband as well. So who was he? I know that Tony and I don't know everyone the others knew, but we had many mutual acquaintances. First, I had to find out the true identity of Madame X. That was the starting point. My pencil began to draw. What did I know about Madame X? I had no idea of her height or weight, but I knew that Tony had described her bare neck in great detail. Had Tony said something about her long neck, or was it Connie? Then I would assume that Madame X was in good shape and probably taller than Tony. That wasn't always the case, but it matched the mental image. Did Tony say anything about hair color? I couldn't remember. Because I was sketching on the fly, the facial oval came out without detail. Tony had said that Madame X's hair was combed on the first date, so I drew long hair. And the neck was long because Connie added that part of the description. I left that for later and started going through the list of women who fit the general description. Basically, I was going to weed out the ones who didn't fit the type of figure. I mentally went through the list of our married female employees. One came to mind. It was Jennifer White. She was above average height, but had a few extra pounds from last year's pregnancy. Jennifer topped the list of suspects. Had I ever seen any signs of affection between them? I don't think so, but over the past few weeks, the relationship had evolved from friendship to a love affair. I felt sorry for Jennifer's husband and child, if she is Madame X. A few more names were added to the list, but it was a very short list. I needed more information. And when Connie came in from a shopping trip, I helped her put the groceries away and we talked while we worked. No, I'm not jealous. What bothers me is Tony getting involved with a married man, regardless of his gender. I can't foresee anything but bad things to come from this affair. I would like Madame X to be honest with her husband if she no longer loves him. Get a divorce before things get too complicated. Connie looked as if she wanted to defend Tony, but held her tongue. You know this isn't worth us arguing about. It's Tony's life, and she can make mistakes if she wants to. Why don't you come here and make me proud to be your wife? I did, and we had a very late lunch, almost dinner, satisfying our carnal desires for each other. On Monday, Tony was back in my office discussing current client needs and the possible needs of those who approached us. We agreed on a time frame for meeting new clients and their needs. A busy week was beginning. After we had settled everything, Tony told me that she had a lunch date with Madame X on Saturday. Didn't you take Ted home Friday night and woo him? You seem to be having a good time together. No, I wouldn't cheat on Madame X. It wouldn't be right. I'll have to be patient until I can be with her again. Hopefully that will happen soon. I couldn't help myself. What about her husband? A look of bewilderment appeared on her face. What about her husband? I mean, is she still doing it with him? Are you the only one suffering from a lack of privacy? No, she says she broke up with him and is saving herself from me. Why doesn't she separate from him and get a divorce? Won't it end badly if she doesn't break up with him? A wistful expression appeared on Tony's face. I've been asking the same question. She's not quite ready to leave him. They've been together for years and she still feels something for him. Hopefully, what she's starting to feel for me will be more than what she feels for him. That's a pretty heartless statement, old friend. What if she ever does the same thing to you? I guess that bridge will have to be crossed when I get to it. Right now, I'll only have rare moments with her. Maybe someday we'll spend more time together. I tried to bring my husband into the conversation. Tony, you mentioned before that you've known Madame X and her husband for a long time. Are you friends with him? She came out of her reverie with a slight wince. What? I asked if you are friends with her husband? Of course, I have known him always. He is a good and kind man. Then how can you do that to him? Won't he be devastated when he finds out? Do you really think you can keep this affair a secret forever? She lowered her head and stared at the tabletop. I pressed her a little more. Do you really think you can stay friends when he finds out? Won't he hate you for what you both are doing to their marriage? Please convince her to end either your affair or her marriage while you have some respect for each other. If she chooses you, she can tell him that the marriage is dead, and the two of you can resume your relationship without causing him so much pain. He might actually believe that you got back together after the breakup, not because he was the cause. She replied so quietly that I had to lean in to hear her properly. I don't know if I have the strength to leave her alone for even a short time. I want her. I ache for her. I need her, Cal. Can't you understand that? I nodded, but pulled her even tighter against me. Yes, I do understand. If I had an adulterous relationship with Connie, it would be hard for me to walk away. But think about what you're doing to her husband. What kind of friend would do that to him? Do you really think he'd just shrug his shoulders and say the better man won? He's a good and kind man. He's so forgiving. I know he will remain my, or rather our friend if she chooses me. I couldn't believe she was so deluded as to say that. This man, this nameless poor man, was going to suffer. He was going to lose his wife, the love of his life, and his friend in one fell swoop. Who on top of that, among all his friends, would be forced to choose sides? How many more relationships, both casual and serious, were going to be ruined because of this? I needed to end this conversation before I said something that would alienate my friend, who is also my boss. Look, Tony, I'm sorry, but I have to get back to these projects or our clients will be upset. I glanced at my watch to emphasize my point. Tony looked a little upset at how quickly I had cut our conversation short, but nodded and headed back to her office. Now I was stumped. I looked at our to-do list, but there wasn't a spark of inspiration in it. It was just a list of names and notes, and nothing caught my eye. I idled in my notebook for a while longer, and then I got up and headed out for an early lunch. Why did I care so much about Tony's new personal life? I never cared about any of her previous lovers. I know she had a few extramarital affairs, but they all ended before disaster struck. The old, don't ask, don't tell principle seemed to work for her. But this one seemed to be more intense for her, and somehow I knew that her husband would find out and be hell-bent on paying her back when he did. I walked around the local park for over an hour, trying to focus on work and not Tony's affair. I grabbed a hot dog from a street vendor and then sat on a bench until I felt calm again. My drawing pad came in handy as ideas began to come by themselves. Suddenly, a spark for one company became an additional spark for another client, and before I knew it, I had several storyboards and could go back to the office to start working things out on the computer. I was relieved that my frustration was over. Connie called me late that night, and we discussed how she would get together with her model friends again. She informed me that they were going to approach their agent for more lucrative assignments, and they needed to think about how to present their wish list so that everyone was playing on the same page. I doubted it would help much, but she needed to work through the issue and work with others in the same boat to come up with a plan that might work. It's so sad that the fashion industry just casts people aside when they stop looking. Since she was going to be staying out late again tonight, I ordered a quick dinner and went back to my storyboards while the inspiration was still strong. I didn't even notice everyone leaving. Tony didn't even interrupt me when she left. Around 10, I passed out and headed to the condo. I got there before Connie this time. I took my usual shower to get rid of the grime of trying to be innovative and was lying on the bed in short pajama pants reading a novel when she walked in around 11:30. Connie was well dressed, which I expected since she was having dinner with the other models. They hate to be seen as ordinary people. Her hair was styled in a nice updo, leaving her neck bare and without any jewelry. It was strange, as she usually wore some sort of necklace. Unraveling her hair, she leaned over and kissed me. Have you been home alone for long, darling? I'm sorry it took a lot longer than I expected. The girls kept straying off topic and had to be brought back to the conversation, but I think we figured out something to take to the agent. As I was recounting how I got home, I noticed an odor mixed with her perfume. I couldn't identify it, but assumed that one of the other women had bathed in her scent and it had transferred to Connie. After all, it had happened before. The next day, I focused on the needs of different clients and did more work. Tony and I had a staff meeting and compared notes. Soon, we had an action plan for most of the clients and people started calling to schedule appointments. Tony wasn't telling me any new stories and I didn't press her on it and just got ready to get back to work when suddenly she blurted out something out of the blue. Cal, you and I have been friends for what seems like forever. We also have a great working relationship. You do everything you can to make Zapiro successful. I want to reward you for that. How would you look at getting a bonus of 10% of the business this year? Instead of just getting a paycheck, you'll get a share of the profits and have more opportunity to influence what we do. I was shocked. Tony had never thought about having a partner, even in the troubled days when we were just starting out and she was worried about how to pay her salary. I think I'm very happy about it. I must first get over my surprise at the offer. I know you never wanted anyone to tell you yes or no, and a partner might disagree with you sometimes. What brought this on? I think of you and, of course, Connie as family. Since I lean toward the lesbian side of the spectrum, I can't have offspring to leave the company too, so a partner who believes in the company as much as I do seems like the best option. Semme! I nodded and said I'd have to think about it and discuss it with Connie. We would have to discuss the contract. I walked back to my desk. Later, Tony came over to my desk. Cal, do you have any plans with Connie for Saturday? I thought for a few moments and checked the calendar on my phone. No, nothing urgent. Why? She shrugged. I'm feeling really stressed, and I thought maybe Connie would like to have a spa day. You know, mud baths, defoliation, full mani-pedi, the whole deal. I don't know, why not? She'd love that. She's been a little stressed out with a few orders lately and probably needs to be pampered. What about Madame X? Oh, I'll try to get her on the program, but I don't know if her husband will be home this weekend. For now, I need to make a date with your wife. She waved her hand as she left my office. I went back to work. That night, I talked to Connie about the partnership deal. She was enthusiastic. Something like this will help solidify our future. We will be inextricably linked from now on. Sharing her enthusiasm, I called Tony and told her to start working with a lawyer. Saturday was supposed to be yard work day, but that's all handled by the condo association, so I went and hit a couple buckets of balls after a good run. I was home for quite a while before Connie got back with Tony, so I was engrossed in a novel I had been putting off. Connie came into the house, pushed the book aside, and whirled around in front of me. Her face brightened and she looked refreshed. What do you think, dear? Am I fabulous? Tony joined in when I answered in the affirmative. You always look fabulous, baby, but today you just glow. Maybe it was the special emollients, cucumber rinse, or mud masks that had that effect? She'd be damned if she didn't look at Tony as she replied, I think it was everything. The whole experience was both invigorating and relaxing at the same time. Tony stayed and helped prepare a light dinner before heading to her home. On Monday, Tony was in my office again. She told me her version of the spa visit. According to her, she had also paid for a visit to Madame X's spa. When I inquired why Connie hadn't told me about the mystery woman, Tony reported that she had kept Madame X away from Connie. In any case, she told me that this spa was very open to women who liked women. It was a fun day. How did you get her out of the house? She waved her hand as if it were nothing. Cal, I did the same thing Connie did. I called her husband and asked if he'd mind if she had a spa day at my expense. He couldn't have agreed any faster if I told him I'd pay for his trip to Augusta to play golf. I suppose he went golfing, fishing, or playing tennis to pass the time. Maybe he was visiting a girlfriend for all I know. It was expensive, but it was worth it. That week, Tony handed me the partnership papers. She was eager to get me to sign them, but I told her I wanted to study them. Eventually, she gave in and we went back to work. Later that day, I looked over the papers, but some of the clauses confused me. It appeared that although I might have 10% of the total value of the business, my share of the profits was much less than 10%. In addition, it appeared that I would have no say in the management of the business, and I certainly would not be changing my title. I decided to seek the advice of an attorney. On another day and at another meeting, well after the group meeting in Tony's office, she lured me in again. You know, since Madame X and I are naked, maybe we should get matching tattoos. I'm thinking of her initials drowning in a rose. That way she'll know of my loyalty, and also that I'm willing to keep our secret for as long as it takes. If she does the same, she can tell her husband that it's for her lover to kiss and lick, and he'll think it's for him, not me. At the end of the session, she asked if I had signed a partnership agreement. For some strange reason, I didn't tell her that my attorney was going over the paperwork. I simply told her that Connie and I had discussed the proposal. In fact, Connie brought up the agreement every night, asking if I had signed it. I told her that I was looking into all the nuances, but that I expected to sign it soon. In the early part of the following week, I received a call from my attorney, Jerry Caldwell, asking me to come to his office as soon as possible. It didn't sound good. I asked one of the others to cover all client meetings and rushed over to his office myself. As he settled into his chair and sipped his coffee, he went over why he needed to see me. Cal, I'm sorry I didn't answer you right away about this agreement, but I couldn't believe the stipulations Miss Lapiro put into it. I took the liberty of contacting her attorney to try to negotiate a better deal, but he was adamant. This is what she wants, and there can be no negotiation. He sighed a little. I recommend that you either get her to change it and change it drastically, or drop the idea. I sensed there was something wrong with the contract, but there was so much legal language in it that it confused me. Please read it with me so I can understand. What is she trying to do? I could start with number 1 and list them, but I might run out of fingers and toes. So let's just go through them. Now, you get an hourly wage, don't you? You get overtime when you work late and on weekends, right? I nodded. So, from now on, if you sign this, you'll get a monthly salary, which I believe is less than what you get now in gross income. I took the liberty of contacting your accountant and checking your average annual income. As a partner, Miss Lapiro can make you work overtime every day and you won't get anything extra for it. But I'll get a percentage of the profits, right? That might be better in the long run. He shook his head. As a partner, you'll only get 10% of 1% of any announced profits for the year. Besides, you won't be able to look at the books at any time. So if she announces a profit of $100,000 next year, your share will be only $100. What was your bonus last year? I had a couple of bonus checks after we signed some big clients. One check was for $5,000 and the other was for $8,300. He shook his head. That's what I thought. And you won't be in line for any other bonuses since you're the owner now. Your subordinates can get more than you. There has to be some kind of compensation. Tony and I have worked together for years and have made the company a success together. I can't believe she's serious about this. I shook my head in denial. Oh, that's just the beginning. There's a provision that says you can't sell your share to anyone but her. There's nothing unusual about a partnership agreement, but usually it just says that the other partner or partners have the right of first purchase at an agreed-upon price. This agreement sets the price, and it will never change no matter how the value of the company grows. In other words, if the company continues to grow every year, as it has from the beginning, your share will get smaller and smaller, and you won't be able to sell it to anyone but Tony. 10 years from now, you'll be making the same salary that's fixed in the contract, and your share of the business may be 1% instead of 10. I didn't even have time to reply before he unleashed the next blow on me. You also can't quit your job or leave the business. You have to maintain your performance level, or she can sue you for non-compliance with the contract. This hints that the settlement amount will be equal to all of your assets. In other words, if you decide you can't continue working for her, she can sue and get everything you own, both cash and real estate. You'll be broke. It was just unbelievable. I couldn't understand what Tony was trying to do. Business was going well. I had no desire to leave or enter into competition with her. I was totally involved in making the business, and certainly her successful. As long as Zapiro was successful, it enhanced my reputation as a designer as well. What would make her try to break me by forcing me to stay in the business? It didn't make any sense. Jerry continued. On top of that, it says at the end of the contract that you won't change your position. If anyone, and I mean anyone, finds out you're the owner, Miss Lapiro can invoke the liquidated damages clause and take everything you own again in court. And to top it off, there's a non-compete clause that is perpetual and has no geographic restrictions. So, to summarize, what you're saying is that I'll work harder to earn less, with no real prospect for any share of the profits. And if I quit, complain, or even say I'm an owner, I'll be left with nothing, and probably won't even be able to find work elsewhere. He nodded. I think you can see why I'm not recommending that you continue with this partnership. I needed to figure all of this out. My reflex reaction was to immediately quit and leave. My little logical brain was telling me to figure out why she was doing this. I can't imagine she resented my salary and bonuses because we all shared bonuses, and my share was usually a little more than all my coworkers. Jerry brought me a new coffee, and we sat and discussed with each other why she was doing this. He thought it was just a bargaining tool and that Tony wanted me to negotiate a better deal, not the lawyers. I wasn't so sure, but I had no idea what else it could be. Eventually, we came up with a plan. Jerry would draw up a new agreement that would be more like a standard partnership contract. I would sign it, and Jerry would mail it to Tony's attorney. If we plan it right, in 2 or 3 days, Tony will find out that I didn't sign the original offer, and maybe we'll figure out what's up. In a couple days, he'll have a new agreement ready for me to sign. Going back to work was hard, so I called in and took the rest of the day off. I went to the park and walked and walked and walked. After a while, I ended up on a walking biking path that went through the entire city and was about 9 miles. I didn't walk the whole way, but quite a ways before I came out onto regular sidewalks where the path looped back. At first, I wanted to contact Connie, but she was out of town filming. She was having a hard time finding work as it was, so I would have to wait until she got home to discuss the contract. As I walked, I wondered why Connie was so insistent on asking if I had signed the contract. Yes, I know she was happy that I'd been offered the partnership, but over the past few days, she seemed a little upset that I hadn't signed the contract yet. I decided not to tell her my concerns. I just had to tell her that I was going to sign the contract this week. I don't know if I'm enough of an actor to do that, but I decided to try to keep Tony and Connie in the dark until something cleared up. Connie got home very late and was dead to the world within minutes of kissing me goodnight. For once, I rejoiced at how hard photo shoots are for models. The next day, I was out of the office taking clients, even ones I didn't have an appointment with, so I didn't even see Tony all day. The day after that, Thursday, Tony came up to my desk. She didn't ask about the partnership agreement, but started talking about her last date with Madame X. I wasn't in the mood. I'm sorry, Tony, but this Michael campaign is driving me out of my mind. I'm not getting a spark of inspiration, and it's very frustrating. Maybe we can talk about her later? Tony seemed a little taken aback. I've always been known as a cheerful and optimistic person, so my frustration was out of character for her. She nodded and left me alone for the rest of the day. I had design problems, but they were pervasive. There was just no real inspiration, and all the thoughts were constantly swirling around in my head. At home, Connie kept pressuring me to take the case. I told her that I was having trouble understanding all the legalities, but all she kept saying was that I had to trust Tony, that she was our friend and had our best interests at heart. I had to keep chewing the inside of my cheek to keep from losing my cool and demanding that she leave me alone. Friday morning, Jerry called and said he had an alternative contract ready. I drove to the office and we discussed how to deliver it. Smiling, he suggested adding the new agreement to the old one. A quick glance at it would fool them for a short time. If her lawyer was lazy, he could just file it and not look at it at all. I decided to sign the original agreement under the name IP Free, and Jerry's secretary grinningly certified only my real signature, and soon the package was in the mail. Since it was too late for the mail and no one was in the office over the weekend to mail it, it would not be mailed until Monday with possible delivery on Tuesday. Back in the office and trying to get on with things, I calmed down a bit, but still wondered what the hell was going on. Tony had been avoiding me ever since I'd let my frustration fester, and that was fine with me. I let her know I'd signed the agreement just by stopping by her office and commenting on it from the doorstep before heading to my desk. I was a little disappointed. For some reason, I thought there was going to be some sort of celebration of my change in status, but the day slowly dragged on until I was fired. I left the office last, as usual, and realized that I hadn't completed a single assignment for a client in the past week. When I got home, I found Connie getting dressed. Her group of model friends wanted to get together and see how their agent requirements were coming along. Since I wasn't in the mood for fun, I wasn't upset about spending the evening alone again. Connie returned around midnight. She was smiling and friendly. I don't know how, but she found out I had signed a contract and wanted to do a little celebrating. We drank a bottle of wine each, and that, combined with my lack of sleep, put me out of commission before we could do anything else. Then came the next morning. Connie asked me not to plan anything, and for heaven's sake, not to bring home any work. She needed my undivided attention. We packed up early and headed upstate to a nice bed and breakfast. When we got home, Connie told me she had an errand to run and would be gone for a few hours. Later, I barely heard the door open, and a quiet conversation was heard. I shook myself up and headed into the living room where I found Connie and Tony sitting on the couch. I froze for a moment as the fog from my dream began to clear. Suddenly, I realized who Madame X was. From the way they were turned slightly towards each other, from the way they looked at each other, and the expression on each of their faces, it was now clear. I thought Tony would at least smirk, since she thought she was the winner, but her look was as friendly as ever. Connie looked a little guilty, but not much. She tried to stand up, but she wrinkled her nose. I found my voice. Don't worry about it. I imagine it's a little tender. Just sit back. She started to speak, but I held up a hand. You have a tattoo, don't you? A rose, I believe. And I believe it has a stylized TL embedded in it. She spoke again. Don't worry about it. I don't want to hear it. There's nothing you can say that will make a difference. I turned to my once friend. You deliberately made sure I knew about it every time you went out with your slut. You teased me with it. What kind of friend flaunts her affair with a friend's wife? What do you do to your enemies? Connie found her voice. I don't want to lose you, but we felt we couldn't keep quiet about it any longer. I love two people, and I want us to be one family. For some reason, Tony started nodding. What the hell was going on? As soon as I finally connected the last dots, I realized that this was where I was supposed to leave, tail tucked. I was the defeated, the loser, the guy with the big L on his forehead. Let's not even talk about the horns. Tony spoke up. Nothing has to change except that I want my share of Connie. I suggest we find a bigger place, a bigger bedroom, buy the biggest bed on the market and split it. Connie wants kids, and I assume you do too. I want to be the aunt who spoils her nieces and nephews. As long as Connie sleeps with me, I'll be happy. I shook my head in bewilderment. I looked at Connie. Is that what you want too? Is that your idea of family? I suppose I'll sleep in the back bedroom and you'll only visit me for procreation purposes. One nodded, the other shook her head. Talk about mixed messages. I was suddenly too tired to talk, argue, or even think. I just turned and walked out. I realized that Connie had parked in her usual spot, and Tony had parked behind me, thus effectively blocking my car. Was this done on purpose or just a coincidence? I think the true answer is, who cares? Because it helped me not drive away. I had my phone and wallet in my pocket, so I started walking, actually running, as a woman was chasing me and trying to get me to go back inside and talk. I didn't look back to see who was who. As far as I now realized, they were interchangeable in their deception. I had to run away. You know, in all these stories, when a man runs away, someone always says he's a coward, but it's really different. He's a wounded animal. He can't think. He can't digest information. He can only feel, and all he feels is pain. Like any wounded animal, he'll lash out if cornered, but that's not what matters to him. No, he needs a protected place to hide and lick his wounds. Alcohol might help him, but he needs protection and silence. Even if he goes to a bar, he'll look for the darkest and most secluded booth. So I ran and ran and ran. I stumbled and fell, but I got back on my feet. I couldn't see anything and couldn't focus on anything except the need to find my cave, my fortress of solitude where I could rest and regain my strength. When I fell for the last time, I couldn't get up again. I was too physically exhausted. It was already dark, and there was no one around me to see how vulnerable I was. I was wounded as if I had been hit in the chest by a sniper's bullet. Some might say I was alive, but only my body was in that condition. The one person I trusted most in the world, the person I told all my dreams and nightmares to, had betrayed me. She may still have my rings on her, but now she would forever bear the marks of her new love's touch. I started to vomit. I threw up until there was nothing left. I had dry urges. I had heard that once your stomach is completely empty, ulcers can occur. So? At that moment, I didn't care. I needed to get rid of the taste of betrayal. I couldn't stop trying to get rid of that taste out of my mouth. End of part 1. To be continued. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.